This is a little follow-up, I think, to a video I made yesterday when I was just showing this object that I'd made, which is this axe handle. And I think in that video I referred to axes as being significant kind of symbols for me, so I thought I'd just expand on that really. I can't really explain why exactly, but what I thought I'd do is just narrate the axes, if you like, the axes that feature in my imagination, and that kind of act as a point of confluence for a number of other ideas, which don't really fit together coherently in any other way, other than the fact that they seem to flow through this single image, this single symbol of an axe or an axe head. I suppose the first one is to do with labyrinths. I was very interested in labyrinths a few years ago, and I discovered that the word labyrinth, I think I'm right in saying this, comes from a word which means axe head, labyrinth or something like that. Because in some labyrinths, what's sometimes called the Chartres labyrinth, there's if you look at it from the air, so to speak, there's a part of it which looks like a double axe head. So I came across that and I was quite interested in that. So there's some weird relationship between axes and labyrinths for me. And labyrinths have another kind of a tangential, symbolic playing out in my imagination, which I won't go into here. But that's where the idea of the axe started from me, as it started to work for me as a symbol. But there's a whole bunch of others. There's an axe features in this quotation that I've always been interested in by Roland Barthes, where he's talking about a woodcutter, and he says something, he says something like, if I'm a woodcutter and I'm asked to say what I'm doing, I said, I can't remember the quotation exactly at least, but he's talking about transitive and intransitive relationships to the world, I guess, really, and that's kind of captured in this swinging of the axe. That it's speaking of something. It's the difference between speaking something and speaking about something. But a woodcutter is completely, at least in Barthes' understanding of it, is completely engaged in his relationship to the tree that he's felling, and that relationship is captured in this object of the axe that unites him that unites his hand to the trunk, and coheres that whole action. So there's something about the axe as a symbol for that coherent relationship. Connected to that one, there's also an axe in my head, at least, for which stands in for some kind of Heidegger thing. Partly because I think it relates closely to what I was just saying about Barthes. Heidegger talks about to-handness and this sense of engagement with the world, and this engagement in the world through tools. Talks a lot about that. But also, because Heidegger, apart from being a Nazi, was very into this whole kind of rural lifestyle. And I always imagine him, on this hillside, in wherever it was he lived, swinging this axe and chopping the wood up for his wood-burning stove. So it just acts as a kind of mnemonic, both for a particular kind of bucolic ambition, and the perils of that as well, but also this loss of oneself in the action, or this redetermination of oneself as an actor in the world through tools and systems of engagement. And kind of related to that also is Thoreau. It's not as florid an idea in my mind, but Thoreau being out there at Concord and again swinging his axe and adopting that kind of lifestyle, and particularly this thing he says where he says this is in Walden, the book called Walden. He set up this kind of self-sufficient little lifestyle down there by Walden Pond, and one of the reasons he says why he did that is he said he went to the woods because he wanted to live deliberately. And I really like that you're putting yourself into a position where it's deliberated. There's not this great kind of cultural surge kind of carrying you along and taking deliberation away from you in a sense. And I know I'm romanticising ridiculously here, but instead of that kind of cultural embeddedness which sweeps you in front of it, there's the kind of deliberation that's involved in reducing your involvement in culture to a kind of a minimum, and embedding yourself more firmly in nature, and that involves, I think, implements like axes. And again, we have images of Thoreau, swinging the axe to build his cabin, swinging the axe to make firewood. So that axe, the axe that also represents Thoreau for me. There's a kind of strange one in relation to a short story by Elias Canetti. I can't remember the name of the short story. If I find it, I'll put it in the sidebar. But in one of his short stories, Elias Canetti tells this story about when he was young, before he could read, and he was fascinated with reading and fascinated with writing even before he could achieve those things, he says. And there's a beautiful little section about where he talks about his father and looking at the squiggles on his father's newspaper and wondering what those could mean. But also he has this relationship with his sister, who's slightly older and who can read and is learning to write, and she has this book that she sometimes lets him look at, which is the practice book, the book that she practices writing letters in. And he really wants to look at that, and when she's feeling mean-spirited, she doesn't let him look at it, or she teases him with it, holds it out of his grasp so he can't see these kind of almost magical letter formations that she's been able to produce on the page. And on one particular day, he says, she teases him relentlessly, and he goes around to the back of the house eventually and gets the axe out of the woodshed and chases his sister around the house with the axe, which is just a terrifying image. But for me, at least, in there's some kind of relationship being set up between the axe and the pen, between the act of reading and the act of division and cleaving. That I don't know if I make any sense there, but the kind of making of a mark that the pens do and the writing does is kind of being parallel to the making of a distinction and the breaking into parts that axes necessarily do, and the usefulness of that. It's not a destructive breaking; it's a constructive breaking and an energy-producing breaking. So that's another axe that I'm finding particularly that's part of that kind of confluence of axe-related ideas. So what have I got so far? Elias Canetti, Labyrinths, Thoreau, Heidegger, Barthes. I think that's it, actually. I thought there was another one. I got just one out of 7. Oh, well. Yeah, that's enough now. I don't know what the status of those things are. As I say, I'm not capable of putting those ideas together into a coherent, articulated theory or an articulated philosophical position or anything of those ideas. I'm not sure they could be put together or would want to be put together. But I quite like the idea that those things lie coexist and lie quite close together and kind of breathe on one another. And for me, having them, as I say, flow through the same symbol, the symbol of an axe, just keeps that alive for me. Hope that makes some kind of sense.